It is now my great pleasure to get tonight's reading started by introducing our first reader, fiction writer Nona Kennedy Carlson. Nona has published her fiction in a variety of journals, and her short story, Queer, received the Jonas Agee Award for Fiction. She is a recent recipient of a Minnesota State Arts Board grant and makes her home in Minneapolis with her husband and their two beautiful daughters. One of the many pleasurable moments in my job, and there are in fact many pleasurable moments, but one of the most is when I call people to tell them that they have been accepted into the Mentor Series. If I'm unable to reach them directly, I leave a rather vague message saying something like, "This is Jared at the Loft, please call me back as soon as possible." Well, apparently this can be a little intimidating for the person receiving the message. Nona was afraid to call me back because she thought I was going to yell at her for not returning books to the small press library. So when she eventually gathered up the courage to return the call, it was a great pleasure to tell her that Marlon James and Lance Samantha Chang had chosen her for the program and that she could keep those books a little while longer. Please welcome Nona Kennedy Carlson.
Thank you. Thank you, Jared. It's such a privilege to be here tonight, to be in the Mentor Series, and to be reading with Leslie and Tami. I'd like to thank the Jerome Foundation for making the Mentor Series possible. This program and this year have been phenomenal. Thank you also to my fellow Mentor Series award recipients and to our mentors for the contributions they have made to my growth as a writer. I have learned so much from all of you. Thank you, fellow mentee Patrick, for being a hard-nosed editor with my work, your own work, and Raymond Carver's work, and for teaching me to do the same. I would like to thank the Loft Literary Center and its supporting members. The Loft, this space, these people are all part of my journey. I would not be here tonight without the Loft. I would like to thank my fiction mentors, Samantha Chang, who is in Iowa at the Iowa Writers Workshop, and Marlon James, who teaches at Macalester and is here tonight. Thanks for being such a remarkable teacher, Marlon. A very special thank you to Jared Zantek, our program director. Before working with Jared in the Mentor Series, I never experienced feeling important or nurtured or valued as a writer. And sadly, I fear I may now be incapable of going back out into the real world again. Because out there, no one cares about how I take my coffee or whether the room temperature is okay while I work. So thank you, Jared, for making my transition back into the world extremely difficult. In all seriousness, Jared makes this program what it is, and I can't imagine it without him. I would like to thank my friends and my family for supporting me as I have pursued my little dream, especially my mom, my daughters, Ellie and Mirren, and my husband, Jeff. Without Jeff, none of this would be possible. I'm a little shaky. I will now read an excerpt from my novel and stories set against the backdrop of the war. It's called To Find Orion. It's like I can't shake the desert. There's still sand on my skin, that thin, invisible grit between my uniform and me. 72 hours ago, I'm sweating my balls off between Baghdad and Osselmanaya, and now I'm back at Fort Bragg, pacing in front of Bronze Bruce, trying to reach my brother Benny on the phone. Benny's flat on his back in a hospital bed in Chicago. But when he picks up, he's out of breath, like he's just run a race. It's me, I say. He knocks out a few ragged coughs. I'm here, he says. No real plans to go anywhere. Yeah, well, thanks for giving me my own personal private Ryan experience, man. No problem, Larkin, he says. It's the least I could do. Hang in there, I say. I'll be home in a few hours. Let me talk to Uncle Jake. Bronze Bruce towers over me. He's the type of war memorial people like to photograph. 12 feet high, dressed in jungle fatigues, carrying an M16 in his right hand, pointed straight up. His finger is off the trigger, at the ready, prepared for any threat. Under a rock, beneath his left boot, a snake lies coiled and crushed. The snake is supposed to stand for tyranny and danger. Bronze Bruce is supposed to stand for soldiers like me. Jake picks up, and I say, not even 22 years old, and his kidney's jacked. He's one sick kid, Larkin, he says. He took custody of Benny and me when we were 13. I'm pretty much on my own now, but Benny's not, and his medical bills have moved in on Jake like a third party. I'd do this if I could, he says. You know that. You've done plenty, I say. I'm the better match. Jake's been great, but he's tapped. On a good day, his face reads like a battered topo map. Benny's time is borrowed plus -10, and I'm on emergency leave. So I skip soldier readiness and risk assessment. I pick up my blue box, the reintegration bullshit, my ticket to Chicago, and the form letter, which is really fucking beautiful. Welcome home from your deployment in support of the global war on terrorism. Thank you for all you have done to support our nation's cause, etc., etc. In Chicago, the doctors do everything at breakneck speed. The physical exam's nothing, and their mental health assessment, after 3 tours, I know how to answer those questions. The doctors say things straight out of a soap opera, like, he's running out of time, and rejection is a possibility. If we were identical, things would be different, but we're not. Hey, Larkin, Benny says when we see each other, you look like a rock, man. Benny's yellow skin looks draped over his bones, like it's grown a size. He's so weak, I'm afraid to do anything but curl my fingers into a fist and give him a bump. You don't look too shabby yourself, I say. Yeah, I'm full of fucking vigor, he says. Dialysis is one big party. 3 days into my leave, a surgeon draws his scalpel in a half smile that begins a few inches left of my navel and cuts through my tattoo that runs shoulder blade to hip. He busts my lower rib, scoops out my kidney, and places it inside my brother. My recovery is like this. A couple of days in the ICU at the transplant center. Another week at County General, my head tight with meds. I thrash in my sleep, pull the IV and the monitor cords, punch and swing at the air. They restrain me and put me on surveillance. I'm drugged up, but the images stay, faces of the dead, each with a small, dark hole through the skull like a punctuation mark, like the period at the end of a sentence. The last face, the boy's, shines bright with tears. The Army assigns me a counselor. After our first session, I'm on a cocktail of Ambien and Seroquel. A week after surgery, Benny's body rejects the one part of me that's supposed to save him. Acute rejection, the doctors say. It's the chronic rejection we want to avoid. Benny fights the way he always has, quietly. The doctors say his condition may fluctuate like this for months. They say shit like, we're doing all we can, and it's a waiting game. Benny asks for his books, and I bring them. A year left in the Army, and I know it's a long shot, but I apply for a compassionate discharge. I can see the sneer on my lieutenant's face, hear his thick drawl. It's country boys like you that make the best snipers, Private, he once said. If a guy can sit dead still in a deer stand all day or creep along for hours stalking turkeys, he can sure as shit snipe a goddamn terrorist. My counselor's name is Ingrid. She eats her lunch during our sessions. A sandwich, an apple, a cookie, a kindergartner's lunch. I check in with her every week, and also I wait. Ingrid is government issue, and our sessions are all about the reintegration model. Soldiers, families, civilians, communities, the human dimension, she recites. I know, I say, I've seen it. It looks like a kid's puzzle. She points to a picture with fat blue circular arrows and bright green boxes. This is the deployment cycle support program, she says. Here's where you are. She points to a green box. Reconstitution. She looks up, brows raised. We need to get you here, she says, and points to another box. Sustainment. Sustainment. Okay, can I ask you a question, I say? Do you think war is murder? The doctors tell me Benny's hospital stay is indefinite. I bunk up at Jake's on the Lower West Side where he brought us to live with him 9 years ago. He kept the family farm outside of Rockford, but I haven't been there in over a year. When we moved to the city with Jake, it was like I walked in two worlds. At school in the city, I was a hick, a podunk. At home in Rockford, I was a townie. I enlisted the week after graduation. In the Army, I was somebody else. With that kind of marksmanship, soldier, my first sergeant said, you'd best go on to sniper school. Benny asks for his sketch pads. He draws nudes of the nurses, and if he feels all right, he laughs at my jokes. Hey, Larkin, he says, I haven't even thanked you. He extends a thin wrist, points to my side. I'm sorry they had to cut through Orion. It's nothing, Ben, I say, just a little scar. Orion was Benny's idea, and I got the tattoo right after I enlisted. He's the huntsman, Benny said, and so are you. He'd pointed to the illustrations in one of his books, and it was the fighting stance that sold me. The drawn sword, the raised shield, one foot planted, the other positioned to advance. How things look since my last deployment. Jake runs the garage with two other mechanics and tinkers on old cars and motorcycles in the evening. Out behind his shop are sculptures Benny has welded from spare parts. A fish with hubcapped eyes, a snake built from coils of chain, a tortoise made of nothing but bearings and manifolds, and one unfinished, a dragon maybe. I wish I could go with you, Larkin, Benny said more than once after I enlisted, but I knew he didn't really want to go. He would never be a soldier. I'll fight for both of us, I said, over beers in the garage. Jake said, your folks would be proud. It was the week before basic, and I just helped him pull the engine from the '68 Camaro he and Benny would restore. The car's guts lay scattered around its frame. Talk to me, Larkin, Benny says when I visit him in the hospital. Tell me some stories. I won't tell him about Sykes, how he tucked his own weapon under his chin one night, how we all woke to blood and brains slapped across the ceiling, the walls. I won't tell him how the smell of cooked flesh and death lives inside me, how it won't leave. I can't tell him how seeing dead, bloated bodies or kids with half their skulls blown off kind of felt normal after a while, or about the lack of sleep, or the burnout, how nobody talked about it. So I tell him about the dog, the stray our platoon took in for a while until he was blown up like everything else. Haji dog or not, he was a good mutt, I say. We named him Jesus. I don't remember whose idea it was. We thought it was so damn funny, Ben. Jesus, we'd call. Come on, Jesus. He was a good boy, half-starved when we found him in a warehouse we were set to demo. Benny says, Orion's star is a dog. You knew that, right? No, Ben, I didn't know that. He says, I think dogs are the same everywhere. I tell him about Bronze Bruce, about how there is a time capsule full of important shit in the base of the statue, a Special Forces uniform, a bust of JFK, and the speech he made about the Green Beret. I tell him about the sandstorms, how the tiny grains got sucked into everything, our chow, our eyes and ears, between our nose, our ass cracks. It was a bitch, Ben, I say. You can't dust that shit off your balls. I wait for him to laugh, but when I look over, he's asleep. By early October, Benny and I are 8 weeks post-surgery. I meet with Ingrid. I have your soldier readiness folder, she says. Let's take a look at the reintegration checklist. I remind her of my request for compassionate discharge. She says, you're coming up on 90 days. My job is to prepare you for redeployment. But it could still happen, I say. I could still get out. She closes my folder and taps it with her nail. All right, she says. She evaluates my skill set and asks what I might like to do if I am discharged. I don't know, I say. What exactly is my skill set? How does trained killing translate into civilian life? I've been armed most of my life. Over there in the desert, I loaded and hauled my M24 like a steady companion for almost 2 years. At the farm, there's a gun cabinet full of rifles and shotguns, my first .22, Benny's BB gun, and my 9mm. I was 7 when my dad took me on my first hunt. Benny was too sick. We went to the marshes near the river where the fault lines run deep below the surface. There's a type of earthquake we get out here, my dad explained. In Illinois? I asked. Believe it, Larkin, he said. They're called strike slips. I asked how big they were. Small, my dad said, more like a tremor or a shift. Spend enough time out here in the quiet, and you'll feel one. He taught me to lie still in a duck blind, in the dark for hours. He taught me patience. Sometime that first year our parents were gone, I came home to find Benny in the swing on Jake's front porch, his nose in a book. His skinny legs were crossed at the ankles underneath the swing, and he wore scuffed, square-toed biker boots, his jeans tucked inside. His long blonde bangs with that lame purple streak were flopped over his glasses. I stared at the purple streak, at the eyeliner, the web of blue veins across his temple, at his pierced lower lip. I looked at the bow of his chest under his T-shirt, like a turtle's shell. He looked up at me with his sad, milky eyes. Hey, Larkin, he said. I'd stood up for him more than once when he was bullied at school, but on that day, I decided it was time he learned to fight. Come on, I said. Get up. I grabbed his bony arm. He pulled back. What, Larkin, he said. I had a pair of my dad's old boxing gloves, and I got them out. Come on, I said. Let's have a go-around. Why, he asked, why are you doing this? I let him wear the gloves, but I wailed on him. He didn't know how to fight, and I didn't teach him anything. I smacked his nose and punched him until he cried out for me to stop. Whips of blood and snot smeared across his face. My fist left a knot that grew into a bright red bullseye on his cheekbone. This afternoon at the hospital, Benny said, Hey, Larkin. He paused to catch his breath. If I don't make it, you'll make it, buddy. I said, you always do. But if I don't, take me to the river, to that spot by our old swimming hole. If I have to spend eternity somewhere, let it be the farm. Eternity? I said. Come on, Benny, don't. Are you kidding me? I imagine the faults below the surface, great planks of rock in a heave of parallel and opposite motion. I asked my dad if the quakes could crack the earth wide open beneath our feet. No, Larkin, he said. The faults are slight. They aren't mapped or even understood. He used a stick to scratch a drawing in the dirt. They don't fracture all at once, he said. They fracture slowly, one small shift at a time. Thank you.